The rhythmic hum of the cargo ship Wanderer had become Talon's lullaby over the past 7 years. As chief engineer, he knew every bolt, every pipe, and every quirk of the aging vessel. The ship wasn't much to look at, a patchwork of repairs and modifications that kept it limping through the trade routes of the outer rim. But it was home. Talon wiped the sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. The cooling system was acting up again, and Captain Jorath would have his hide if they had to dump any of the perishable cargo. The payment for this run would barely cover their fuel costs as it was. "Come on, you stubborn piece of junk," he muttered, tightening a valve with more force than necessary. The pipe groaned in protest but finally sealed properly. Talon nodded in satisfaction as the temperature gauge began to drop toward acceptable levels. He was about to close up the maintenance panel when he heard it, a soft thud from somewhere in the ventilation system, followed by what sounded like breathing. Talon froze. The Wanderer carried cargo, not passengers, and the only crew members on board were himself, Captain Jorath, and Vex, their pilot. Someone else was on the ship. Talon reached for his multi-tool, the closest thing to a weapon he had at hand. "Who's there?" he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "Show yourself." Silence answered him, but he could still hear the faint sound of breathing. Talon moved toward the narrow crawl space that led deeper into the ship's infrastructure. The space was cramped, designed for maintenance access rather than comfort, but it connected to most of the vessel's vital systems. "I know you're in there," he said, more confidently than he felt. "Come out now, or I'll seal this section and vent the atmosphere." It was a bluff. He would never actually do that, but it seemed to work. There was a rustling sound, and then a figure emerged from the shadows. Talon stumbled backward, nearly dropping his tool. The stowaway was unlike any being he had ever seen. Her skin was a luminous blue that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Her eyes, large and expressive, were a striking violet that contrasted with her skin. Her features were delicate but strong, and her hair fell in waves the color of a midnight sky with pinpoints of light that resembled stars. She was beautiful, but it was the fear in those violet eyes that caught Talon's attention. "Please," she whispered, her voice musical despite her obvious terror. "Please don't tell anyone I'm here." Talon's mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. What are you?" The woman straightened her shoulders, a flash of pride momentarily replacing the fear. "I am Nalaria, daughter of the High Counselor of Azuri," she hesitated, then added, "and I am in great danger." Talon ran a hand through his disheveled brown hair. This was not how he had expected his day to go. "Look, I don't know what an Azuri is or why you're hiding in my ship's crawl space, but stowaways are bad news. The captain will have you thrown off at the next port." "No," Nalaria stepped forward, her hand reaching out to grasp his arm. Her touch was cool against his skin. "You don't understand. If they find me, they will take me back, and I will not go back." There was something in her voice, a desperation that resonated with Talon. He had run from his own past once, though under very different circumstances. "Why are you running?" he asked, his voice softer now. Nalaria glanced around nervously, as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. "I was to be married to Prince Dravak of the Krell Empire, a political arrangement to secure peace between our worlds." Her eyes darkened. "But the Krell do not want peace. They want our resources, our technology, and they want me as a symbol of their conquest." Talon frowned. He had heard stories of the Krell, brutal, ruthless beings who expanded their territory through force and intimidation. "And your people agreed to this?" "My father had little choice," Nalaria said bitterly. "The Krell threatened war, and our defenses are weakened after the stellar plague." She looked down. "I was to be the sacrifice for my people's safety." Talon felt a twinge of sympathy. The politics of distant worlds rarely concerned him, but the idea of being traded away for political gain struck a chord. "So you ran." "I could not be the instrument of my people's subjugation," Nalaria said, her voice strengthening. "The marriage would give the Krell access to our sacred technologies, technologies that could be weaponized." Talon sighed deeply. He should report her presence immediately. Stowaways meant trouble, and trouble meant reduced profits or worse. But there was something about her, something beyond her ethereal beauty, that made him hesitate. "How did you even get aboard? We haven't docked anywhere in weeks." Nalaria's lips curved into a small smile. "Your ship stopped for supplies at the Cordova station. I persuaded a cargo handler to look the other way." Persuaded, Talon raised an eyebrow. My people have certain abilities, she said, a hint of mischief breaking through her fear. Nothing harmful, just persuasive. Great, not only was he harboring a fugitive princess, but one with mysterious powers. Captain Jorath would space him for this. A sudden noise from the corridor made them both freeze. Footsteps approached, accompanied by the captain's gruff voice. Talon, you still down there? The cooling system better be fixed by now. Talon made a split-second decision. Hide, he whispered to Nalaria, gesturing toward the crawlspace. I'll come back when it's safe. Nalaria retreated into the shadows just as Captain Jorath rounded the corner. The captain was a burly man with a perpetual scowl that had only deepened with age. There you are, he growled. Vex says we're approaching a patrol checkpoint. Need to make sure everything's in order. Talon's stomach dropped. A patrol whose? Krell, Jorath spat. Bastards are expanding their territory again. Just routine inspection, but I want the ship looking legitimate. No contraband, no surprises. Talon swallowed hard, acutely aware of the very significant surprise hiding just a few feet away. Right, I'll make sure everything's in order down here. Jorath nodded and turned to leave, then paused. You look like you've seen a ghost, boy. Something wrong. Just tired, Talon lied. Been wrestling with that cooling system all shift. The captain grunted. Well, get some rest after we clear the checkpoint. Can't have my engineer making mistakes because he's half dead on his feet. As Jorath's footsteps faded, Talon leaned against the wall, heart pounding. Krell patrol, if they found Nalaria. She emerged from the crawlspace, her face pale even through the blue luminescence of her skin. They're looking for me, she whispered. The patrol they must be. Talon nodded grimly. Probably, which means I should turn you in right now. Nalaria's eyes widened. Please, she begged. I cannot go back. You don't know what they'll do to me, to my people. Talon studied her face, searching for deceit but finding only genuine fear. He thought of his own past, of the times he had needed someone to take a chance on him. He thought of the stories he had heard about the Krell, none of them good. He made his decision. If I help you, he said slowly, I'm risking everything, my job, maybe even my life. Nalaria nodded, understanding the weight of what he was considering. But I can't just hand you over to people who would use you as a political pawn. He ran a hand through his hair again, a nervous habit. We need a better hiding place. The patrol will search the ship thoroughly. Relief washed over Nalaria's face. Thank you, she breathed. I will repay this kindness, I swear it. Let's focus on keeping you hidden first, Talon replied, already scanning the room for options. Then we can talk about repayment. As they worked together to create a more secure hiding place among the rarely inspected waste reclamation tanks, Talon couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. But when Nalaria smiled at him, her entire being seeming to glow with gratitude, he found it difficult to regret his decision. Whatever came next, Talon knew his life aboard the Wanderer would never be the same again. The Krell patrol vessel loomed outside the Wanderer's viewport, its angular hull bristling with weapons. Talon had never seen one up close before, and he found himself wishing he never had. The patrol ship was at least 3 times the size of their cargo vessel, with a design that spoke more of intimidation than function. Steady, Captain Jorath muttered from his position at the comm station. Just a routine check, nothing to worry about. Vex, the pilot, snorted. With her bright orange hair cropped short and her wiry frame, she looked deceptively fragile, until you noticed the hard glint in her yellow eyes. A native of the low-gravity moons of Persephone, Vex had reflexes that bordered on precognitive. Nothing to worry about, she repeated. Have you forgotten what happened to the Starchaser last month, impounded on some fabricated charge, crew interrogated for days? That was different, Jorath said, though his expression suggested he wasn't convinced of his own words. They were carrying restricted goods. So they say, Vex replied darkly. Talon stood at the back of the bridge, trying to look casual while his heart hammered in his chest. Nalaria was hidden in the cargo hold, tucked away inside an empty cryo-container that was shielded from standard life-form scans. It wasn't perfect. A thorough inspection would reveal her presence, but it was the best they could manage on short notice. The comm crackled to life, and a cold voice filled the bridge. Cargo vessel Wanderer, this is Lieutenant Corval of the Krell Empire. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. Joreth leaned forward, activating the response channel. Understood, Lieutenant. We're a registered trading vessel carrying agricultural supplies. All our papers are in order. There was a pause, and then, we will verify that for ourselves. Maintain position and prepare for boarding party. The comm went silent. Joreth turned to face Talon and Vex, his expression grim. Vex, stay at the helm, Talon with me to greet our guests. He lowered his voice. And for the love of the stars, try to look normal. Talon nodded, hopping his face didn't betray the panic he felt. As they made their way to the airlock, Joreth spoke without turning. Something you want to tell me, boy. Talon nearly stumbled. What do you mean? I've known you 7 years. You're a terrible liar. Joreth still didn't look at him. Whatever you're hiding, I hope it's worth risking all our necks. Before Talon could respond, they reached the airlock. The seal hissed as it opened, revealing 4 Krell soldiers in sleek, dark armor. They were humanoid but taller, with sharp features and golden skin that seemed to have a metallic quality. Their eyes were entirely black, with no visible iris or pupil. The leader stepped forward, his gaze sweeping dismissively over Joreth and Talon. Captain Joreth Tannet, he said, consulting a data pad. This vessel is registered for agricultural trade between the Outer Rim colonies. That's right, Joreth confirmed, his tone carefully neutral. We're carrying seed stock and farming equipment to New Avalon. The Krell officer's lips thinned. We'll see. My men will inspect your cargo. Any restricted areas will be unsealed for examination. Joreth nodded stiffly. Of course. My engineer Talon will accompany them to ensure proper handling of sensitive equipment. The officer looked at Talon with something like amusement. Very well, but be advised, any interference will be considered an act of obstruction. 2 of the soldiers followed Talon toward the cargo hold, their heavy boots clanking against the metal floor. Talon's mind raced, trying to come up with a contingency plan if they discovered Nylaria. He had no weapons, no combat training, and absolutely no chance against trained Krell soldiers. The cargo hold was dimly lit, rows of containers stacked neatly against the walls. The cryo-container hiding Nylaria was in the far corner, partially obscured by larger crates. Talon hoped it would be overlooked, or at least left for last. What's in these? One of the soldiers asked, pointing to a row of sealed containers. Agricultural drones, Talon answered truthfully, for automated planting and harvesting. The soldier grunted and moved on, scanning each container methodically. His companion was more thorough, occasionally stopping to check something against his data pad. Talon tried to appear relaxed, but he could feel sweat gathering at the back of his neck. They were halfway through the inspection when a soft chime echoed through the hold. The soldiers exchanged glances. What was that? The first one demanded. Talon's mind went blank for a moment before he recovered. Environmental controls, he lied. The cargo hold maintains a specific temperature and humidity level for the organic materials. The soldier seemed satisfied with the explanation, but his companion narrowed his eyes. Show me the control panel, he ordered. Talon led him to a nearby wall terminal, praying that the actual environmental controls wouldn't choose that moment to cycle. To his relief, the display showed normal operations. The soldier studied it briefly before turning back to the inspection. As they moved closer to Nylaria's hiding place, Talon felt his anxiety spike. He tried to distract them with technical explanations about the cargo, but the soldiers were methodical and thorough. Finally, they reached the section containing the cryo-container. The first soldier swept his scanner over the area, then frowned. There's an anomaly in this reading. Talon's heart stopped. Probably the insulation material, he suggested, trying to keep his voice steady. These containers have multiple layers of radiation shielding. The soldier moved closer to the cryo-container, his scanner beeping more insistently. This one is showing unusual energy signatures. That's one of our specialty units, Talon said quickly. It contains genetically modified seedlings that require specific containment protocols. The soldier hesitated, then motioned to his companion. Check the manifest. While they were distracted with the data pad, Talon noticed a subtle glow emanating from the seams of the cryo-container. Nylaria's skin, it was glowing brighter under stress, visible through the tiny gaps in the container's seal, if they noticed. Thinking fast, Talon stepped toward a nearby control panel. Let me adjust the lighting, he said. These older cargo holds have terrible visibility. Before either soldier could object, he dimmed the lights significantly. Sorry, sometimes the controls stick, he apologized. Let me see if I can. Enough, the second soldier snapped. Restore normal illumination. Of course, Talon said, pretending to struggle with the controls. It's just these old systems sometimes. A sudden loud alarm blared throughout the ship, cutting him off. The soldiers immediately reached for their weapons. What is that? The first one demanded. Talon was just as surprised as they were. I don't know, The comm system activated. All personnel engine malfunction detected, Vex's voice announced. Possible radiation leak in engine compartment. All non-essential personnel evacuate to safe zones immediately. The soldiers exchanged looks of alarm. Radiation leaks were not to be taken lightly, even for the well-armored Krell. We need to complete our inspection, the second soldier insisted. The first one shook his head. Not with a radiation leak. We'll report this and return when the ship is secure. They turned to Talon. Engineer, you will show us to the airlock immediately. Talon nodded, relief flooding through him even as he wondered what was really happening. Had there actually been an engine malfunction, or had Vex somehow engineered a diversion? As they hurried back through the corridors, they passed Captain Joreth arguing with the Krell officer. Absolutely must complete our inspection, the officer was saying. Not at the risk of radiation exposure, Joreth countered. Unless you want to explain to your superiors why you ignored standard safety protocols and contaminated your men. The officer's face darkened, but he couldn't argue with the logic. Very well. You have 48 hours to resolve this issue and submit to a complete inspection at Waypoint Station 17. Failure to comply will result in immediate impoundment. Joreth nodded grimly, understood. The Krell departed, their expressions suggesting they suspected some form of deception but couldn't prove it. As the airlock sealed behind them, Joreth turned to Talon with fury in his eyes. Engine room, now, he growled. When they reached the engine room, they found Vex calmly recalibrating the control panel. No sign of any emergency. What in the seven hells was that? Joreth demanded. Vex glanced up, her expression innocent. What was what, Captain? Don't play stupid with me, Joreth snapped. There's no radiation leak. Isn't there? Vex raised an eyebrow. Sensors detected an anomaly, better safe than sorry. She met Talon's eyes briefly, a silent message passing between them. Joreth wasn't fooled. The two of you are hiding something, and I want to know what it is, now. Talon hesitated. He trusted Joreth, had worked with him for years, but he had also promised to protect Nylaria. Before he could decide what to say, a soft voice spoke from the doorway. The fault is mine, Captain. All three turned to see Nylaria standing there, her blue skin glowing faintly in the dimly lit corridor. She had shed her hiding clothes and now wore what appeared to be ceremonial garments of her people, flowing fabrics in deep blues and purple. The Celestia's engines hummed a deep, reassuring melody as Thalia made her way through the service corridors. It had been 11 days since she'd found Princess Nayara hiding on the observation deck. 11 days of careful deception and growing tension. The search for the missing Azurithian royal had intensified, with Protectorate officers performing random cabin inspections and monitoring passenger movements. So far, their ruse had held. Nayara remained hidden in Thalia's quarters during shift hours, venturing out only in the technician's company, disguised in a spare maintenance uniform with her distinctive blue skin partially concealed by strategic applications of cosmetics that dulled her natural shimmer to a more muted tone. Thalia paused at a junction, checking her datapad. The security patrols were scheduled to sweep the port-side residential corridors in about 20 minutes. Perfect timing. She ducked into a supply closet, retrieving the small package she'd hidden there earlier, rations she'd managed to acquire without arousing suspicion. When she finally slipped back into her quarters, she found Nayara sitting cross-legged on the bed, eyes closed in meditation. The princess's midnight hair was tied back simply, and without her finery she looked almost ordinary, if one could ignore the shimmering indigo skin and the natural grace that seemed to radiate from her even in stillness. Dinner, Thalia announced, placing the package on the small table. Nothing fancy, but it's hot. Nayara's eyes opened, those remarkable violet irises catching the light. Thank you, any news? Security's tightening again. I think they're getting desperate. Thalia sat down, unwrapping the simple meal of synthesized protein and vegetables. We dock at Helios Station in 3 days if we can get you off the ship there. Nayara nodded, accepting her portion. The station master owes my family a debt. If I can reach him without being detected, he might help arrange discreet transport to the free systems. Their fingers brushed as Thalia handed her a utensil, sending an unexpected jolt through the technician's body. She'd been trying to ignore the growing awareness between them, the strange tension that had nothing to do with their precarious situation. "You've been quiet today," Nayara observed, her melodic voice soft in the small space. Thalia shrugged, just thinking about what happens after Helios Station. "You mean what happens to you?" The princess's perception was unsettling. "The Krellian mercenaries have surely logged everyone who's had contact with you. Once you're discovered missing, they'll investigate the crew. I'll be questioned." "I would never let you suffer for helping me." Nayara's expression grew fierce. "If necessary, I can arrange for you to come with me to the free systems." Thalia laughed, the sound harsher than she intended. "And what would I do there? Fix environmental systems in some refugee settlement?" "You could do whatever you wished." Nayara set down her food. "That's what freedom means, Thalia." They ate in silence for a while, the ship's ambient hum filling the space between them. Thalia couldn't help stealing glances at the princess, how she'd changed in these days aboard the Celestia. Gone was the frightened royal in hiding. In her place sat a determined woman with steel beneath her gentle exterior. "Tell me about Azurith," Thalia said, breaking the silence. "What's it like?" Nayara's face softened, her eyes growing distant with memory. "Imagine floating islands among perpetual sunset skis. The crystal spires of the capital city catch the light of our 3 moons, refracting it in cascades of color across the landscape. The air smells of sweet blossoms and distant seas." "Sounds beautiful." "It is, but beauty can hide darkness." Nayara's expression clouded. "My people believe in harmony above all else, that the individual must sacrifice for the collective good. For generations, that meant royal marriages to secure peace. Like yours to the Krellian leader." Nayara nodded. "Lord Varax is 3 times my age, with 7 prior consorts, all dead under mysterious circumstances. But the Azurithian Council saw only the protection his military might would provide against the expanding Dominion forces." "So you ran." "I chose to believe there must be another way, that my life and the lives of my people are worth more than political convenience." She looked up, meeting Thalia's gaze. "Does that make me selfish?" Thalia considered the question carefully. "I think it makes you brave, standing against tradition, risking everything for what you believe is right. That's not selfishness, that's courage." Something shifted in Nayara's expression, a vulnerability Thalia hadn't seen before. "Few in my life have ever seen it that way." "Then they weren't really looking at you," Thalia said quietly. The space between them seemed to contract, charged with unspoken emotion. Thalia became acutely aware of their proximity in the small quarters, of the gentle rise and fall of Nayara's chest as she breathed, of the subtle scent that clung to her, something like night-blooming flowers. The moment was broken by the ship's announcement system. "Attention all passengers and crew. We are experiencing minor navigational adjustments. Please secure all loose items in your quarters." Thalia frowned. "That's odd, we're in open space, no need for course corrections." She moved to her terminal, fingers flying across the interface as she accessed the ship's systems using her maintenance authorization. "Something's wrong," she muttered. "We're changing course completely. This isn't a minor adjustment." Nayara stood, moving to look over Thalia's shoulder. "Where are we heading?" "The Cadian Nebula. There's nothing out there except—" Thalia's blood ran cold. "Except a Krellian outpost." Their eyes met, understanding passing between them without words. Someone had compromised the ship's navigation. The Celestia was being diverted, and there was only one reason why. "They know I'm still aboard," Nayara whispered. "They're taking the entire ship to Krellian space." Thalia's mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. "We need to reach the backup navigation controls in engineering, if I can override the command sequence." "You'd be risking everything," Nayara interrupted. "If you're caught interfering with ship operations, that's a capital offense." "If we do nothing, you'll be handed over to Lord Varax." Thalia stood, grasping Nayara's hands. I can't let that happen. The princess looked down at their joined hands, her blue fingers intertwined with Thalia's tan ones. Why? She asked softly. Why risk so much for me? The question hung in the air between them, demanding an answer Thalia wasn't sure she could articulate. Why indeed? She'd gone from reluctant accomplice to dedicated protector in less than 2 weeks. Somewhere along the way, Princess Nayara of Azurith had become more than just a fugitive she was harboring. She had become someone Thalia cared about deeply. Because you deserve a chance, she finally said. A chance to choose your own path. Nayara stepped closer, the space between them electric. And if my path leads me away from you, what then? Thalia's heart hammered in her chest. Then at least I'll know you're free. The princess raised a hand, her blue fingers gently tracing the line of Thalia's jaw. In all my years in the royal courts, surrounded by those seeking favor and alliance, no one has ever given so much expecting nothing in return. I wouldn't say nothing, Thalia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I've come to care for you, Nayara, more than I should. The confession hung between them, fragile and dangerous. For a moment, neither moved, suspended in the gravity of what had been revealed. Then Nayara closed the distance between them, her lips finding Thalia's in a kiss that felt like falling into starlight. Her skin was warm, with a faint electric tingle that sent shivers racing down Thalia's spine. She tasted of exotic spices and possibility. When they finally parted, breathless, Thalia rested her forehead against Nayara's. That complicates things. A smile played across the princess's lips, or perhaps it simplifies them. The ship shuddered slightly, another course adjustment confirming their dire situation. Reality crashed back upon them. They were still in danger, still hunted. We need to move, Thalia said reluctantly, pulling away. The engineering section will be minimally staffed during night cycle. If we're going to reach the backup navigation systems, it has to be now. Nayara nodded, her expression shifting from tender to determined. What's the plan? Thalia retrieved her toolkit and a small energy disruptor she'd modified from standard equipment. We use the maintenance shafts to reach engineering. I override the navigation commands, restore our original course. Then we find a way to communicate with Helios Station, warn them about the Krellian operatives aboard. And if we're caught? We won't be, Thalia said with more confidence than she felt. She handed Nayara a small communicator. Keep this with you. If we get separated, head for access shaft 12B. It leads to the escape pod bay. As they prepared to leave, Nayara caught Thalia's hand once more. Whatever happens, she said softly, these days with you have been worth everything. Thalia's throat tightened with emotion. We're not saying goodbyes yet, Your Highness. Not goodbyes, Nayara agreed, her violet eyes luminous in the dim light. Promises.